I made that mistake. So I was trying a variety as part of my sort of testing procedure, and I put some on at the Cannes Boat Show, and as you say, I was sweating like an absolute dog. And it dripped down into my eyes. And then your eyes start stinging like absolute good.
Exactly that.
And you're weeping in front, trying to do a piece to camera.
It's not great, is it? And your eyes go bright red and they think you've got a hangover.
Exactly.
Professional.
I mean, to be fair, there's a reasonable chance that you might have a hangover too, but don't usually weep blood like Le Chiffre.
Welcome to episode 6 of Boat Nuts, the podcast all about boats. This is Boat Nut number 1. This is Hugo Andreae, editor of Motorboat and Yachting magazine, and I'm Boat Nut number 2, Alex Smith, deputy editor of that same magazine. Now, where are we today, Hugo?
We are down at Ocean Village Marina and on a particularly lovely boat, one of my personal favourites. This is the Fairline Squadron 58. It is a stock boat from Approved Boats, all £2.6 million worth of it. But I have to say, it is an absolute beauty.
It really is, yeah. Just the detailing all over it is fantastic.
Love it. Love this glass transom. I love this modular furniture. Love the fold-down platforms. Yeah, there's a good reason why this is one of our top choices in this 50-foot flybridge sector.
I've just been spending my time looking at this little bit of stainless steel detailing on the sides, those little vents with a sort of backlit LED in blue.
You're getting nerdy again. Don't go.
Nice, though, isn't it? Anyway, we're here to chat about boats, as I say. And today, we're not going to chat about this particular boat. We're going to talk about the Windy SR40, which you tested in Palma, didn't you? I
did, absolutely. It's the very first boat they've built, and because it belongs to one of our own readers, I've managed to sea trial it.
Exactly so. I'm looking forward to that. We're also talking about something that's very topical on a day like today when it's 30 degrees, and that is sun creams. It seems like a simplistic thing, but there are a few things that people ought to bear in mind.
Yep, I am super invested in this. I think it's such an important topic, so plenty to say and hopefully some useful advice.
Exactly so. And our issue of the day, well, it's a very topical one as well. It's Powercats. They're everywhere. They're filling the market. In fact, there's an Aquila 44 just ahead of us here. Beautiful boat. They come in all shapes and sizes. So we're going to discuss why they're so prevalent and whether each of us would like to invest in one.
Absolutely. There's some very distinctive pros and cons. So we're going to run through them and hopefully come to a conclusion, which we may or may not disagree about.
May not is likely. But look, let's get into the air-conditioned luxury of that saloon and out of the sun, shall we? And get going.
Let's do it.
Cool. First up then is our boat of the week, and this week it comes from Windy, a Norwegian company with a very long and distinguished history in sports cruisers, but this is not that kind of boat. This is a walk-around platform called the SR40, and Hugo, you took a look at this in Palma, didn't you?
I did, and I was really intrigued by it because it's quite a different style of boat for them. You know, in the olden days, they were a sort of mainstream-ish in terms of the type of boats they built. They were more sort of traditional sports cruisers. And then they sort of split into two different ways. They were doing smaller, really open sports boats.
Yeah.
And then this sort of yacht tender line that is more kind of super yacht tenders. And that left a bit of a gap in the middle for a while of a really sort of suitable boat, particularly for Northern European climes. And this they've come back with a really interesting hardtop design that is just the right size for the sort of UK and European market. And thanks to that, hardtop feels much more suited to our kind of market. So I was really excited to see this one.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I know the Windy fleet has become more fluid over recent years, but what they're best known for, as I've already intimated, is sports cruisers. So you've got the cabin up there in the bow, relatively tapered hull, quite a flat foredeck, because they're obviously very sporting boats. High performance is a key part of it, but wide open cockpits, full beam, no side decks, step up through the screen, and this is something a bit more practical.
Exactly. And I think, you know, particularly for the older generation, which I sadly now count myself among, having to step up through the screen has always been a bit of a drawback. And yet their sort of walk around yacht tender line has just been a bit too upmarket in terms of size and scale, and very kind of Mediterranean focused. You could get a little sunshade overhead, but not really the full weather protection that you get from a hardtop. And this boat is bang on line, 40 foot long, exactly the right kind of size. But you've finally got the protection that I think some of those open boats were lacking. So really interested to see, particularly how it performed, because that has always been a big part of the appeal of a Windy. They build them beautifully and they design really great hulls that have fast, efficient performance, but also fuel efficiency being a big part of that. Because if you run quicker, it also tends to run more efficiently. and fantastic handling. So really interested to see if they could combine all of that in one boat.
And they really got to, haven't they? Because Windy is a byword for high performance, isn't it? I mean, they're fantastic drivers' boats, always have been.
Absolutely. I mean, some of those boats in the sort of early 2000s, the Siroccos, the Zondas, I mean, they've always been such fun to drive.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge to produce something that has all that practicality, but is still great to drive. It's a little bit like, maybe when Porsche introduced its first Cayenne SUV, there's a lot of sort of controversy around that. Can Porsche create a boat that drives and handles well, but has more of that kind of practical stint about it? And I think some of the traditionalists were a little bit edgy about it.
Yeah, but you know what that says? If you're getting pushback from the public, it means they value that brand. They value what you've done in the past. They're kind of affiliated to it. They're invested in it. And that's a positive thing as far as Windy are concerned. But I'm in that camp because, where was it? A couple of years ago, you and I went out together to test a pair of Windies. You were on one of the smaller open boats, outboard powered, I think, which you loved.
I did.
I was on the 34 Elise. It had an absolutely blinding time because it kind of catered for the traditional Windy owner and traditional Windy expectations. But as you say, this is not that. Designed by Espen Oinio, though, isn't it? So the same.
Yeah. I never quite know how to pronounce it. Norwegian.
It's Oieno. I'm going to say Oinio.
We'll go with that.
All right.
I'm sure he won't mind.
Different style, as you say, but same designer. So what's kind of the, I don't want to say USP. It makes me sound like a marketing person.
Yeah.
But what is the USP of this? Because it deviates, as I say.
It does. Well, what I really like about it is the whole hardtop design. It really feels like a more convertible boat. If you get a traditional hardtop, you might have a sunroof, but ultimately you still feel like you're indoors, and then you've got a sunroof, you might get a little bit of air. But the great thing about this is it has these huge side doors. Technically they're options, but I don't know why you wouldn't order them because there's no drawback. But the whole door slides back, and cleverly the window aligns perfectly with the window behind it, so that when you open it up, it only really feels like you've got one window. It's open at the back. You've got two sunroofs overhead. And with those two side doors open, it feels pretty much like an open boat when you want it to. But then when weather turns, or it gets a bit colder, or it's a bit rough, so you get a bit of spray, doors slide back, sunroof shut, and you've got total protection inside for the helm and most of the cockpit area. So where you're sitting at the back of the boat in the more sort of sociable dinette area. So you have complete protection.
So it's almost kind of like a coupe style pilot house, sort of semi-pilot house style boat. Because you can also can you have optional aft doors as well?
You can't have doors there, but you can get really good set of canvas covers. Cool. So you can effectively enclose the whole area so that it's pretty much like a wheelhouse.
While presumably keeping those walk-around side decks open to the bow.
Exactly. And, I love a walk-around side deck, I've got to say. I mean, I know it does reduce the size of the
Makes you sound like an anorak, but I totally agree. I really, really do.
Well, it's just so nice to sort of walk around and move, and you can put the fenders out. You can go and sort out the anchor. It's just a much easier boat to move around. And of course, it then opens up the bow area for socializing zones. Yeah. If you've got a walk through windscreen that you have to sort of climb up steps and over, or teetering along little side decks, you don't really want people going up there except when they absolutely have to.
No, exactly right. If you're on the foredeck of a traditional Windy, it's because you're using the anchor, or you're, chucking lines to a pontoon. That's it, isn't it? Pretty much.
And with this, it means you've got lovely sunbeds up there. Yeah. You can move around it. The whole boat effectively becomes part of the entertainment zone.
Well, that is not just theory, is it? Because one of our readers, Tim Innes, who writes for our Boat section of Motorboat and Yachting magazine, he bought a 34 Elise shortly after we reviewed it, actually, owned it for a year. And because he, by his own admission, is getting on in years, him and his missus, he's traded that in for a new SR40 specifically because he doesn't want to have to clamber up and onto a precipitous foredeck. At his time of life, he wants something easier, more practical, for exactly the reasons you described.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can completely see why you do that. Because it doesn't really feel like you're losing a lot. It doesn't have the largest interior. We can talk about that a little bit in a minute. But in terms of that usable deck space, I think it just totally transforms the boat.
Well, talk to me about the usable deck space after the helm, because, of course, when you've got the traditional full beam Windy cockpit, it's a big old space. Yep. Well, here you've got the side decks, of course, so you're narrowing in your furniture, presumably.
Yes, but, of course, you've got the option of folding platforms. Again, a first for Windy is to have these big folding aft platform, or side terraces, effectively. Yeah. Now, they are an option, and they are a pretty expensive option. I think it's about 70 odd thousand euros.
That's right.
But it does expand that cockpit area. And it's not just the fact that you've then got more space to use. It's the fact that it frees up the views, because when you've got the traditional sort of gunnels there, that obviously sort of blocks a certain amount of the view and it feels like you're a bit hemmed in. When you come to anchor, you put the platforms down, you suddenly have this wonderful sort of open area at the back of the boat. It improves the views. You've obviously got access to the water from the side as well as over the stern. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, whether it's worth that much. That's very much a personal decision.
But talking about views over the stern, this is a boat that comes with the option of outboards as well as inboards, right?
Absolutely. Really crucial point. A lot of boats in that kind of adventure boat market area are all outboard driven.
Yeah.
And Windy do offer that option. And you can have a couple of whacking great outboards. You can have two 600 horsepower V12 outboards.
Yeah.
So you get full on sort of outboard 50 knot style performance. But critically, you can also have diesel stern drives. And again, that is a big game changer in that market, to have the option, the extra range, the obviously more affordable fuel, the better fuel efficiency. And of course, the prettier look. You just don't have two big outboards cluttering up the stern there.
Exactly, Dan. It's good to see that you got the inboard option, partly because it's a traditional Windy thing. That's what they tended to spec. And also because you're talking about these fold-down bulwarks. Now, this is heavyweight kit. And you and I have both been on boats where so much heavyweight kit after that cockpit, like those fold-down bulwarks, tends to make a boat a little bit stern heavy and a little bit bow up. So if you can shift the engines forward and down, that helps a bit. So how does it drive?
Well, I have to admit, I've only driven the diesel stern drive. I haven't driven the outboard version. So from that point of view, it rides absolutely beautifully in terms of the balance of the boat. There's no issue with trim. It does go well. We had sort of 40 knots, a little bit more than 40 knots. It does feel a bit heavier, and particularly in terms of the sort of center of gravity, than some of those wonderful open boats that are relatively light too. And you've got all the weight low down, and they are such a joy to drive. And in fairness, it doesn't quite have that sort of immediacy of throttle response, and it doesn't quite dive into the turns with the agility of some of those more open, deliberately sort of sportier boats. But what you have to remember is that you need to judge it by the rest of the market, not just, by Windy terms, it's not quite as quick or quite as agile. The seakeeping is still really good. Don't get me wrong there. But by the general standards of the market, it is still a very quick, very agile, good performing boat.
So you approach this boat with Windy expectations, and were
I think
slightly disappointed by the way it drove?
No, I wouldn't really say disappointed, because I sort of expected it was going to be. Inevitably, it's going to be a bit heavier. And because you've got quite a tall hardtop, that moves the weight up a bit as well. The other thing that took me a while to work out, it was fitted with these Zipwake automatic. No, it wasn't Zipwake. I think it was actually Humphrey. Either way, it had automatic trim system, which is brilliant up to a point. It takes the sort of guesswork out of it. It takes care of it all for you. When you're just cruising along in a straight line, it will work out where the wind is coming from and deliberately counteract that. Or if you've got a bit of wave action or whatever, it's very clever. But the only trouble is it tries to kind of second guess you. So when you turn into a corner really quickly, it will then take a little bit of time to react and thinking, does he mean to do this? Is this the wind doing it? Is it wave doing it? Or does he want to do it? And so and then by the time it then counteracts it, you're then trying to counteract it. And it all ends up in a little bit of a sort of muddle as to who's trying to do what.
Exactly right. Which is why whenever you're on a proper sports boat, something with a little bit of performance heritage behind it, a proper hull, proper designer, you kind of need to turn those auto systems off.
Yeah, and that completely transformed the way it drove, actually. Yeah. And suddenly it just became that much more fluid. You could get more heel into the turn. And when you are turning hard, you want it to heel a good way, because that actually counteracts your own G-force rather than feeling like you're being swung sideways. The boat heels into the turn. Your G-force is going down into the boat rather than feeling like it's trying to chuck you over the side.
Exactly. It's very reassuring, isn't it?
And the whole thing just became more fluid, more natural.
More like a Windy.
More like a Windy.
Yeah.
So, like any boat, you've got to learn its sort of foibles a little bit and its characteristics in order to get the best from it.
But the thing is, that test boat you looked at in Palma, that was actually Tim's boat, wasn't it? Our reader. And I know for a fact, having read the stuff he's fed my way, that he spec'd that up in a very big way. So it's weightier than the average, I would suggest. He's got a gyro stabilizer on there. He's got air conditioning. Because he's got the gyro, he's also got a generator.
Yeah.
He essentially added about 40% to the base price by picking option after option after option to really maximise the versatility of that platform. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I think you do need to tick quite a lot of the options, because the starting price for the boat, you look at it and first up and you think it's a Windy, it's 40 feet. And I think the starting price is around about 627,000 euros. Yeah. But that is for a totally bare open boat. By the time you've added the doors and various bits and bobs, it does end up really pushing on towards or over €1 million, which is a very substantial difference. But I do think you really, if you're going to take advantage of that platform and make use of all the things it offers, I think you do need to spec up quite a few of those. I don't think he had the platforms, for instance, which I can see, it's a nice thing to have, but I'm not sure I would necessarily want to.
No, he said no on the basis of that price as well, 77,000 euros plus tax. Just thought it was a bit much.
Yeah.
Went a different way.
It was a little bit noisier than I was expecting as well. Another sort of common issue with some of these hardtop designs is that the noise effectively gets sort of trapped inside the hardtop, and it acts a little bit like a sort of sound box. Yeah. And with the big diesel engines under the deck, there is a little bit of reverb, but I think Windy are going to work on that and add a bit more insulation. But it would also be another interesting comparison with the outboard,
Wouldn't it? They tend to be a bit more refined, don't they? And they're a little further aft as well.
They're a little bit further aft. They're petrol rather than diesel, which inherently tend to be that much quieter, particularly those big 600 horsepower V12s. They are super smooth. Got a twin-speed gearbox that keeps the revs low. So it'd be really interesting to try that. And I think with those, it's meant to be good for 50 knots. So, it'll be an interesting test to see how they both perform, but we only had the chance to drive the diesel at the moment. Yeah, and I think, to be honest, most UK or Northern European buyers probably would stick with the diesel just for the greater availability of fuel, apart from anything else. Yeah,
so if the drive is pretty strong and the day spaces are very strong, stronger than the traditional Windy might be at that same length, well, how's the accommodation?
Well, it is by default relatively compact, because when you have those walk-around decks, that clearly eats into the space below deck. So you have only got the one main cabin. It's open plan, but it's very nicely done. So the fit out of the interior is all done by a company called Design Unlimited, British design company, chap called Mark Tucker, done a really nice job of it. There are some really nice little touches and flares, little splashes of colour, really good quality materials, some quite clever solutions as well. They've got the sort of split wet bar, and they've taken the trouble of putting magnets in the bases of all the glasses and cutlery so that it stays in place in the drawers. I think they've missed a little bit of a trick, because really you want that on all the tables and surfaces too, so that when you move it around, your glass then sticks to the table and doesn't move or budge.
Yeah, I've seen that before. There's a German company does exactly that, isn't it?
It might well be. Well, the company's called Silwy that actually makes the glasses and the crockery.
But of course, as you say, you need the table to collaborate with it, and otherwise it's pointless.
And I think Absolute have done that. And
that's right.
See there, and you can hang the glasses upside down in the cupboard and stick it to the table. But that wouldn't be the work of a genius to just add a bit. You could probably even have sort of non-stick metal mats that you could sort of place around the place if you wanted to. But in terms of space, there is just that one open plan cabin, unless the outboard version has a very clever aft cabin option, which I don't know if you've seen it.
I wasn't aware of that. This is where the inboards are vacated. So space.
Yeah, exactly. So where the two big diesels sit in the inboard version, that obviously frees up quite a big amount of space, but not enough for a full height cabin.
Yeah.
So very cleverly, what they have done is
copy Axopar. No?
No. Way more interesting than that.
Oh, good.
Much more like it. In fact, I'm told that the inspiration for this was, in fact, the original VW camper van, where the roof goes up and then sort of has a little canvas wraparound. So very similar idea. That aft sun pad, which is clever in itself, it's got sort of sliding backrest and so on.
Yeah.
But that is mounted on 4 electronic sort of struts, effectively, that lift up vertically at each of the 4 corners. That lifts that up, and as the sun pad moves up, all these canvas covers or sort of see-through plastic covers all elevate with it, and that creates the headroom in the cabin to have a really quite cool looking,
like a mini marquee.
Yeah, it is basically.
It's quite cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a little mini electronic marquee. I mean, I don't know how often you're really going to use it, but quite fun to have that option, particularly for the kids would absolutely love it.
Yeah.
If you say, oh, have you seen where your cabin is? No, I can't see.
Yeah.
Just press a button, all lifts up, and suddenly it's like a kind of, as you say, a little camp sort of appears at the aft end of the boat.
We'd all spend £1 million or more to impress our kids, wouldn't we?
Well, it's got to be worth it. Just
absolutely.
If it keeps them quiet for 20 minutes.
So here's a key question. If you knew nothing about the boat, if you were to strip off the Windy branding and you came upon that boat in a marina, took it out, would you recognise that is a Windy? Would you understand that as inherited?
That is an interesting question.
Windy
I'm
bloodline?
not sure you would straight away. And in fact, when I first saw it, I thought that's quite unusual because you're so used to seeing all these very sleek looking open Windy boats. And because 40 feet is it's a decent sized boat, but it's not a great deal of length to be able to sort of spread the hardtop out over. It's always difficult. The shorter the boat is, the harder it is to make a hardtop design look good. But I quite like, there's something quite sort of pragmatic about the design. It's like they've looked at it and thought, you know what, let's make this look a bit more sort of utilitarian and a bit more sort of adventure style. There's some very nice touches. For example, so on top of the hardtop, you can rig it out with these effectively kind of roof rack. And then it's got steps built into the side of the hardtop supports. That means it's very easy to climb up the steps and access that. And you can then put your kayaks up there or your SUPs. You can get a bike rack up there. So I quite like that. Again, it's sort of playing to that sort of SUV type lifestyle vibe. I don't know how often you use it, but it sort of looks quite cool. And most of us do carry an SUP at least on board. And the fact that you don't have to constantly try and roll it up and pack it away, you just strap it to the roof rails, gives you a little bit of a adventure type vibe and look. So I don't mind the fact that it's not as sleek and as obviously sporty.
Well, it sounds good to me. Even as a traditional Windy fan, I think I can pretty much get on board with that. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you're going to buy one boat, you need it to do as many things, most of us, as possible. And it sounds like that is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I think most people treat it primarily as a day boat.
Yeah.
And though, if you need 2 permanent cabins or even 3 permanent cabins, there are boats you can get. But I don't think that's really a problem. I think the majority of people who buy that boat are going to use it mainly as a day boat, perhaps as a weekender. And if that's what you want, it ticks all those boxes. And because you've got that convertibility, you can use it all year round. But equally, when the sun does come out, it feels like an open boat and goes like an open boat. So I think the small trade-off in terms of performance and handling and so on is worth it for the extra versatility and the extra practicality it gives you. It's still got all those lovely Windy touch points of lockers everywhere, beautifully lined. So they really think about how people use their boats.
So we'll leave boats in the past and we'll move on to the product of the week, which this week is sun creams. And that doesn't sound particularly exciting, but what it lacks in excitement, it certainly makes up for in importance, because still I think people can overlook that on the water. And it's fundamentally important that you protect yourself properly on the water, because you've got the sun from above, you've got the sun coming up from the water surface below. So you're essentially getting double the rays hitting you, aren't you?
Absolutely. And I think people underestimate the difference that makes. And I feel really strongly about it, actually. I mean, I know I love being out in the sun, but the growth in the increase of skin cancer at the moment is really worrying. And it's not just in Australia or the Mediterranean that it's a problem. It's a major issue in the UK. I think, was it last year alone? I think I got some figures, but I think there were 230,000 cases diagnosed in the UK last year alone. So it is not just something for the Southern Hemisphere that people need to worry about. In fact, it's the number 1 form of cancer that is now diagnosed worldwide. And it is nearly all preventable if you take proper protection from the sun. The vast majority, certainly of the more dangerous melanoma cases, are entirely preventable if you take the right precautions.
Well, I'm just stealing your excellent research here, Hugo. Is that true? A single bad sunburn or 5 mild sunburns doubles the risk of cancer?
It certainly does. Particularly in your younger years, if you get 1 bad blistering sunburn or 5 mild sunburns, the statistics show that it doubles the chance of you developing some form of skin cancer in later life. So I know it's not a particularly cheery subject to talk about, but it is an important one. And I've lost a family member to skin cancer, and you really don't want to go there. And the fact that you know that it is preventable and avoidable should make people pay proper attention to this. And it's not a major deal to apply sun cream, but I think, certainly growing up, I wasn't aware of that issue. And
well, evidently my parents weren't aware either. Every time I went on bloody holiday, I'd come back with skin peeling off me, and it'd be like a badge of honour. Look, I've been on holiday.
Absolutely. I remember my mother used to have this sort of reflector thing she put around her neck and slathered herself in, I think it was called Pitt's Win at the time, which I'm pretty sure was probably not much other than sort of cooking oil with a nice smell.
So she could sizzle herself in the sun.
But and now it's all about sun protection factor, and I don't think you can get those kind of sun protection factors of less than about 10.
No, I haven't looked recently, but a little longer ago when I wasn't so enlightened, I was looking in boots for me factor 5 and me factor 8, and they don't exist.
No,
it's just a nonsense. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. What are the technical differences between the types of sun cream that you can buy?
Well, there are two key ways of preventing sunburn. So what you're trying to avoid is the UV light. So it's the light that you can't see. There are three types technically. There's UVA, UVB, and UVC.
Yeah.
UVC doesn't really penetrate the atmosphere, so you don't need to worry about that. UVA isn't the one that burns you, but it causes gradual long-term deterioration to your skin. So it's the one that starts giving you wrinkles and sunspots.
Yeah.
UVB is the more dangerous one because that's what actually burns you. But ideally, you want a sun cream that will protect against both UVA and UVB. Sun protection factor, the term SPF, that's also, I think, widely misunderstood because what it is, it increases how long you can stay out in the sun before you burn. So that is different for different people. If you're pale skinned and burn easily, you're still going to burn more easily, whatever sun cream you apply. So what worked, if I put a sun cream factor 10 on and you put a sun cream factor 10 on, it doesn't mean we can both go out in the sun for 5 hours. Because if I burn more quickly than you, then it's not going to be as effective on me as it is on you.
So the principle is if you burn in 10 minutes naked, then you'll burn in, 100 minutes?
Exactly.
With your factor 10?
SPF 10 means you can stay out in the sun 10 times longer than you normally can before you burn. So if you burn in 10 minutes, you should be able to save for 100 minutes. If you don't normally burn for 20 minutes, then you should be safe for 200 minutes. But bottom line is, I don't think anybody should really be using a sun protection factor of less than 20. A lot of people now will go 30 or even 50. But there are two ways that sunscreens can protect you. There's one called a sort of physical block, which tends to be that stuff you often see in Australian cricketers. When you see that sort of slightly white line, and it physically blocks the rays. It uses things like titanium dioxide to actually physically stop the sun getting to you. And then there is a chemical sunscreen, which will actually penetrate the skin and filters. It uses a special filter that effectively turns the UV light into heat. It's a kind of chemical reaction, but by turning it into heat rather than UV light, it prevents the burn. No particular advantage to one or the other. Some people favor one, some people favor the other. The physical ones tend to be a little bit kinder on the skin because they're not reacting with it, whereas the chemical ones can cause a little bit of irritation, or depends again on some people are more sensitive than others.
Presumably the physical stuff will wash off faster if you go for a swim or if you're sweating on a hot day though.
Depends a little bit on the formulation, but you absolutely should look, particularly as a boater, to check on the waterproof rating, and they are formally tested for how waterproof they are. But yeah, on the whole, I think certainly if you get a waterproof chemical one, it is more likely to stay bonded to the skin. And I don't think they claim there are these sort of, they used to talk about once a day applications. Yeah. I don't think anybody claims that now, but you can still get some that are waterproof and that will last for a really long time.
You've written an article on this, haven't you, where you specifically tested a set of products?
Yeah.
So what are the specific recommendations you make for boaters?
Well, I mean, firstly, I wouldn't worry too much specifically about which brand is the right one. The first thing is to wear some kind of sunscreen, to know that you're using it, to understand the sun protection factor, and to apply it in sufficient quantities. Again, you know, it's a little bit like antifouling. All antifouls work if you apply them correctly, and it's far more important to make sure you apply it correctly than particularly which brand you go for. But personally, I am a big fan of something called Ultra Sun. I've got a little bottle of it here. This is one of those ones that it is largely a chemical one. You apply it once in the morning. Crucially, you need to apply it sort of 20, 30 minutes before you go out in the sun, because that gives it time to kind of sufficiently absorb and bond into the skin.
Is that one of those sprays where you basically protect the bloke next to you instead?
It depends how good your aim is. It is.
Yeah.
But I find it's really waterproof. It lasts a really long time, not just in terms of the SPS factor, but in terms of apply it once in the morning, do it before I get on the boat, whilst I'm having breakfast or whatever it is. And then by the time you get out in the sun, it's all set. And it does seem remarkably waterproof. I've been really impressed by that. I've worn it out in the Seychelles. I put it on in the morning and I've never burnt when I've been wearing it. So personal recommendation, I think that's a really good one. There are other ones. There's something called a P20 or a P30 now. But crucially, it doesn't really matter which brand you go for. Find one you like, find one you're comfortable with, and wear it.
Yeah, but crucially, I was telling you earlier while we were having a cup of tea, I was doing my research on this, and I might have got a bit frustrated and yelled an expletive in relation to sun creams. And my missus comes running in. It turns out she's a bit of an expert. So she shared some pearls of wisdom with me.
Come on,
now, look here, the stuff you've been discussing, great for a bloke or just anyone, frankly, who isn't in the slightest bit vain. You whack it on your arms, your legs, your face, your head, your neck, everything.
Smell too much. I'm not a big fan of these ones that smells like you've just been pasted for a barbecue.
No, but you know how we go on these trips. We go to a foreign boat show like Cannes where it's super hot.
Yeah.
And you don't want your face to be an oil slick when you're trying to shoot video.
True.
Well, there are specific face sun creams that are kind of thinner and silkier instead of that absorbing very quickly and cleanly, and you wouldn't actually know you're wearing any of that stuff. And as I say, the missus is something of an expert. So particularly crucial in the winter, of course, because, you know, when you're wrapped up in foulies, you think you're not burning. You still got to wear an SPF. So a facial sun cream is pretty good. And because, of course, at this part of the market, they think, well, we're selling to women for the most part. We're kind of an offshoot of the cosmetics industry. We can charge a fortune for a tiny little 50ml vial. Well, there are alternatives. I'll mention the expensive ones, which are apparently fantastic. Now, there's La Roche-Posay, which is 17 quid for 50 mils. That is brilliant, by the way. My missus gave me some to go to last year's Cannes. And I went to buy some for
50
myself.
mils, that'll do about one ear.
I don't know. It's amazing how far it goes, actually. But I wasn't going to tolerate 17 quid. So we did a bit of experimentation. Bondi Sands. In fact, this is the stuff. Check this out. I carry this with me everywhere, every single job. Bondi Sands Face SPS 50 Plus. This is, I'll just put a bit on my hand so you can see. See how thin that is?
Nice.
Yeah, and you feel that. You rub that in. It disappears. It doesn't feel greasy.
You don't smell like
no,
you just come out
it doesn't make you smell like a tart's handbag either, does it? It's brilliant. I absolutely love that stuff.
I made that mistake. I tell you, I was trying a variety as part of my sort of testing procedure, and I put some on at the Cannes boat show, and as you say, I was sweating like an absolute dog. And it dripped down into my eyes. And then your eyes start stinging like absolute good.
Exactly that.
And you're weeping in front, trying to do a piece to camera.
It's not great, is it? And your eyes go bright red and they think you've got a hangover. Very professional.
I mean, to be fair, there's a reasonable chance that might have a hangover too. But don't usually weep blood like Le Chiffre.
No, well, exactly. And you know, another reason, I'll tell you what, I'm quite a modern man these days. Because, do you know, women go boating too.
Jeez.
Yeah. Now, and some of these ladies and some men like to wear a bit of makeup. Now, that's not really possible to use the potions you've been talking about when you've got a face full of makeup. Well, believe it or not, you can use this stuff as a base layer. Put your moisturisers on, put this over the top of your moisturisers, then you can put your makeup on top of that. And then there are kind of face mist sprays that are designed to get over makeup.
Are you wearing makeup at the moment?
Can you tell?
Oh, amazing.
So that's important stuff. That's good stuff. And also, lip balm. You can't forget your lips.
Now, I'm not, I mean, you're quite right in terms of SPF. I don't bother with a separate lip balm for my lips.
Do you not?
You know, I think this is, I don't know if this is an urban myth or not, but I feel as soon as whenever I've worn lip balm, you wear it for a couple of days and then you have to keep wearing it the entire time.
Because your body ceases to generate natural oils because you think, oh, he's doing it himself with this stuff.
Exactly.
I think you might
so
be right
then you
about that.
have to wear it.
If I've committed to the segment now, so I'm going to have to talk about it, aren't I?
Go on then.
All right, so this is cool. This has got a Norwegian flag on it, which helps. That's good enough for me. My missus swears by this. It's only, the lip balms tend to be sort of SPF 20 to 30. You rarely get a 50. And if you do, you look like an Ashes cricketer, don't you, out for a day at Lord's. So you just got to reapply this stuff.
Yeah.
But that...
And that is a crucial message. You've got to apply the correct quantity. And they say usually about 5 ml per body part, effectively. So 5 ml is about a teaspoon.
That's right.
And a body part counts as an arm, a leg, a chest, a face, or a back.
Yeah, well, I've got another trick there. If you don't carry a teaspoon around with you, I do actually. I genuinely do a couple of them. Yeah, because
are you a spork man?
No, proper.
You never quite know when you're going to need a teaspoon.
Well, I was a military man. I could kill you with a teaspoon.
I don't want to know.
But me missus tells me, right, forget about your teaspoon. If you take your little bottle and you run a little line up the forefinger and the finger next to it, that's a teaspoon. Perfect for your face. Perfect for any particular zone of your body.
Not a great look, though, is it? When you've...
you've got to just sideline the vanity once again, Hugo, and just go with the
vanity. I'm worried about offending everyone else. If you've got 2 fingers up with your sun cream on the front side, you're flicking a V to the person next door whilst you're applying it.
Sometimes I feel inclined to use it as an
excuse. No, I was just applying my sun cream.
Yeah, exactly that. So, I think that's quite important.
All right, I'll go with that.
Cool. I think we've done sun creams to death.
Quite enough of that.
All right. So take it seriously because it matters.
No, genuinely, regardless of anything else we've said, if you take one thing from this, it is use sun cream and apply it properly, because one day, if you don't, you might end up regretting it. And then you're going to wonder, why didn't I listen to that bloke who told me that?
Exactly. Next up, we're on to our issue of the day. And I'm excited about this one.
Go on then.
For a lot of reasons. Our issue is the rise of the Powercat. Now, this is particularly pertinent right now because, as you know, I'm writing at the moment a 10-page preview to the Cannes Yachting Festival.
Yeah.
And for the first time ever, it's unprecedented, I could fill easily all 10 of those pages with brand new Powercat models, whereas in past years, you'd have 1 or 2, maybe.
Absolutely. And it used to be a couple of niche manufacturers and they were the only people doing them.
Yep.
And if you wanted one, you went to 1 or 2 of these sort of 2 or 3 regular catamaran builders.
Yep.
Now it seems everybody is doing it. What's going on?
Yeah, established builders branching out, the likes of Prestige.
Absolutely. Mainstream
players.
Manufacturer produces hundreds of boats every year, only ever done monohulls up until now. And suddenly it's producing a range of Powercats, not just one.
It is investing huge money in it. And they don't do that lightly. They do that because they've researched the market and trends, developing trends. And this is a trend that's not going away. We're getting new players, the likes of Mackay and Drakan, Archipelago.
Yeah.
All sorts of new names coming up. And the question is why? And the question is also, would you invest at this stage or would you wait, as some people might? Not everyone's an early adopter. I'm not sure you could even call them early adopters yet with Powercats, but would you invest in a Powercat now, or are you still a monohull man? So look, first thing, why is this happening? What do you reckon?
Well, I think it's really, as ever, it's market led, and there are a number of theoretical advantages to a catamaran design. First up is stability, because you have that wider beam and 2 hulls. It is naturally a more stable design than a monohull, which has narrower V, so any wave that comes is going to rock it from side to side. If you've got them spread across 2 deep hulls, that's a naturally more stable platform, particularly at anchor. Second is fuel efficiency and ride quality. Again, because you've got these 2 relatively slender hulls rather than one quite fat single one, it slips through the water more easily, gives you a wider range of cruising speeds. Because of the laws, displacement laws, if you're trying to push a boat through the water, 2 long, thin hulls are going to be a lot more efficient than trying to push one fat one through the water. And fuel efficiency, increasingly important thing. Yeah. And people seem to be more comfortable cruising more slowly. It used to be all about racing there in a hurry, bashing your way through the seas.
Yeah.
Now, even the fast planing hulls, a lot of people are using them in displacement mode. which is not really where they're at their best. Whereas a catamaran, you have a nice broad range of cruising speeds, anything from sort of 5 to 15, maybe even 20 knots if you've got big engines. And it's comfortable and efficient at pretty much all those speeds.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that when we're talking about Powercats, we're not talking necessarily about big, voluminous, sluggish things. There are all kinds of Powercats on the modern market, aren't they? Even for those who want serious performance.
Yeah, well, there was that amazing Safe Haven Voyager you tested the other day. That's good for best part of 50 knots?
50 knots, yeah, with ease in rough seas, wave-piercing hulls, seriously, surface-piercing propellers. I mean, it's an exotic piece of kit. You know when you step on board a boat and there's seat belts. You know you're in for it, don't you?
Absolutely. And of course, there are those super high performance, the kind of Nortex and the really, really quick things that'll do 100 knots. But it's a bit of a sidestep that. I don't think many people in Europe and the UK are buying those. But you're right. Yeah. There are adventure catamarans like the Archipelago range, aluminium, all about sort of hardcore offshore cruising. There are big voluminous things. And of course, that is really the other big win, is the amount of space you get on board.
It can be. I mean, obviously a cat that's kind of adapted from sailing cat use, adapted for power, that tends to have a wider beam, a bit more volume, for obvious reasons. I mean, you can actually get a beam on a sailing cat that's 50% of the overall length. Now, on power cats, you tend to use a narrower beam.
Some people still go for that 50-50. People like
they push up towards that, don't they?
Leopard, they're pretty close to 50-50. And it does mean you get fantastic deck space.
You do. I'm not really a fan of just massive deck space for the sake of deck space. I like to see it properly used, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But obviously, one of the key considerations, apart from the beam on a cat, has got to be the bridge deck, the clearance between those holes, the vertical clearance.
Yeah, so that's been one of the big changes. The traditional sailing cat has these two relatively narrow hulls. It means you can pack a lot of small cabins in, but they tend to be quite small because they're restricted to the width of the hulls. But now they've started building these really deep bridge decks between the hulls, which are actually deep enough to fit a cabin in.
That's
so
right.
You no longer have those kind of restrictions of cramming the cabins into these little narrow hulls.
Yeah.
And now you've got a great big, usually a sort of whacking great owner's cabin that spans the gap between two hulls. So you have usually a sort of heads or a bathroom in one side. Right. You might have an office in the other side, and then this lovely big cabin in the gap between the hulls.
Yeah, and they're proper showstoppers. I mean, you look at the boats from Prestige that we've already mentioned. They're it was an M48 now, the M6, the M7, the M8. I mean, it's something else, isn't it? It's a proper super yacht style cabin you can get on relatively compact.
Yeah,
boats with relatively short waterline lengths.
But it can have an impact, particularly in rough seas.
Yes,
because if it is low enough to actually make contact with a big wave, and bearing in mind that the hulls are relatively narrow, the wave will pass between the hulls. Mm-hmm. And in a rough sea, if it impacts it, you've then got a really big flat area right at the front of the boat. Yeah,
and it's you feel that impact, don't you? I mean, it sort of shudders, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
When you get a proper slap on the underside. And also, even when it doesn't quite make that impact, if you've got a dropped bridge deck on a boat, a power cat that aims for volume and for accommodation. And quite often, even in quite moderate seas, if you're sitting out there on the foredeck and the wave shapes get close, you get a kind of a high pressure zone that spits water up and out over the bow and just showers you with seawater, doesn't it? Which again is not necessarily ideal.
No, so it does take a bit of refining. And I think in some ways, the bigger the boat, the better it all works, because with scale, you can then lift everything higher off the level of the sea surface. You then get less interaction with that bridge deck. You then get wider hulls themselves. So you can get some fantastically comfortable. Once you get up to the kind of 70, 80, or even there's 100 feet, things like that, Sunreef 100, they are
massive.
Really spectacular.
I mean, do not expect much in the way of thrills at the helm with a boat like that.
No, they are not driver's machines.
No.
But I have to say, I've chartered a couple of Powercats through a company called The Moorings, and it has always worked really well as a holiday platform. One of the other advantages that I think people often underestimate is the privacy it gives you. By having two separate hulls, it means I chartered one with my brother and his wife, and we basically had a hull each, and that's really lovely.
It is a wonderful thing. And if you have one of those forward cabins that we're talking about, often you'll have 3 staircases, won't you? One, in the centre at the forward part of the saloon down to the private owner's cabin, and then the rest of each hull with private staircases. So brilliant in that regard, but actually, you talk about cats being at their best on larger platforms. Well, the first cat I ever tried, Powercat, was in Myla, just up from Falmouth. It was the old Powercats company. I don't know if they exist anymore, certainly not by that name. And that was a compact sort of 6.5 metre thing with a couple of little outboards. And it was brilliant. They just lent it to me and my then missus for the weekend. And the stability and the space and the efficiency, it run on fumes. And in terms of the practical day out, you could just beach it. No trouble at all. So it's lovely and flat. Nice.
Another advantage, they've got really shallow drafts, even for a big boat. So you can get into a lot of shallower bays that you just couldn't get into in a big deep draft monohull.
Exactly that. And then if you do want to go out into the rougher stuff, the softness of the ride.
Yeah.
When you're coming over a crest and you're bracing your thighs, thinking it's going to send a bit of an impact up my backside, up my spine, and you land and it's gentle and you think, my God, that's a different world to a monohull in many ways, isn't it?
Absolutely. So it really does. And I've had much the same experience actually down in the Scilly Isles. They use a lot of little Powercats. They have these sort of almost like timeshare properties, and you have a sort of timeshare of one of these little Powercats too. And I completely agree with you. You get some pretty big seas in the Scilly Isles.
Yeah.
And for a small boat, they're incredibly capable.
Yeah, they are. And they're confidence inspiring in other ways too, because of course, with those twin hulls, you've got tremendous directional stability when you're whatever speed you're running at.
Yeah.
And also because you're splitting your engines further apart, you split the throttles, the manoeuvrability, turn on the sixpence is so easy to park these things.
Yeah. And again, I think that's why they make great charter boats.
Yeah.
Relatively inexperienced people. And you think, ooh, that looks a bit scary. But because, as you say, they're so far apart, you can just put one throttle forward, one throttle back, and it'll just spin on the spot.
Yeah, yeah. So, and of course, the fact on larger cats that you're talking about earlier, that you have such a natural surface area, such an expanse of potential hardtop or roof structure to use for solar panels, for roof racks, for whatever you really want. Or in the case of Archipelago, you also mentioned on their 47, I think it is, they got that roof space. You can use that for a little crane and tender, whatever kind of adventure gear you want. You've got that capacity. And because you've got the excellent stability, putting that additional weight up top, it's not a major issue. It's not like
No, absolutely. And you're right. The solar panel thing is a really big deal. The number of those new cats that are coming out around 60 foot. And it makes sense at that stage. On a monohull, I question the validity of hybrid engines when you're having to sort of plug it in to get a few miles here and there. But for things like silent yachts and sunreef, have you seen how clever that is, where they're starting to mold solar panels into the actual hull? So you're not just getting the sun shining down on the hardtop, you're also getting the reflection from the sea onto the side of the hull. So some really clever thinking. You can get genuinely useful amounts of electrical power.
Yeah.
And it's charging the whole time. That's the other thing you forget. Most people use boat, you go cruising for a couple of hours, you stop for lunch, you cruise for another couple of hours. But all the time, the sun is pouring down, filling up those batteries. So you do get genuinely useful range from a solar power cat.
Yeah, they put forward a compelling case, don't they? And actually, I do admire the volume of some of these machines. I went on the silent SY80, I think it was, in Cannes. Would it have been the SY80? Maybe
I think they do an 80. I don't think I've been on that boat. I have on the Sunreef.
It was quite extraordinary, the volume. But as I was saying earlier, I don't like volume for the sake of volume. I've been on a few monohulls where you walk into the saloon and it's kind of cathedral-like, not quite cat-style cathedral-like, but they've sort of foregrounded the volume by just putting furniture up either side, peripheral, just to say, look at all this magnificent space. Look at this 20-foot walkway I've given you. Well, that's where's the merit in a 20-foot walkway? If you've got big space like that, and I see this on a few cats recently, and as we say, some of these Powercat manufacturers are kind of just kicking off with prototype models. So there's not quite the heritage there to lean back on. But if you've got huge volume, and I did this on my narrowboat, a 60-foot narrowboat I used. Not huge volume, but it was, I wanted to delineate the space without actually blocking the light. And it's done well by some manufacturers and poorly by others. You step on board a Pearl and you see they use vertical slats to give a suggestion of delineation between two zones without blocking light, without blocking views. So you have to zigzag around as you go up the boat instead of having a wide open walkway that's saying, look at the volume you've bought yourself. Because like I say, volume in itself, not a great deal of use. I want to see it ingeniously used so that you feel you've got zones.
And I agree. And a lot of the time, certainly in the early days when it was converted from a sailing cat, you'd often just get a big sort of empty foredeck or even net between the hulls.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I think the other really smart move is having a door in the windscreen effectively.
Yes.
So you can walk straight through the saloon out into the foredeck and then have a really useful bow lounge there and make use of all that beam you've got.
Yeah, exactly.
So rather than having a sort of dead space at the front, you've got a really nice outdoor lounge at the front of the boat as well as the back of the boat.
Yeah.
And you get the sight lines straight through it. So you can, rather than having to go along the side decks, you can see straight through it, walk straight through it.
That's a bit of a game changer.
Yeah.
That, isn't it? It really is something deeply desirable.
Yeah, it does tend to mean you have a fairly vertical front screen, which isn't always the most attractive look.
Yeah, and it also means if you want that, and we're basically, you're talking about the sunken bow lounge, aren't you? That's straight through the door at the bow of the...
And they do that even on quite small, Leopard do it on their sort of 40-foot boats. And it does just make it more usable, effectively.
It does. That is a gorgeous place. A sunken bow lounge is fantastic, but on a lot of cats, you know what you have to trade in order to generate that sunken bow lounge is that fantastic full beam owner's cabin that spans the hulls at that point of the boat.
Well,
that's often the case.
Yeah.
So it's often one or the other, and both are just majestic in their own way.
Unless you get up to that really big size where it all starts to come together and there's really very little compromise, other than the fact you're probably going to be paying a bit more for your berthing space because you're occupying the space of two boats.
Yeah. So I thought, look, we've talked a fair bit about Powercats. It's an exciting sector of the market. I don't think there's a more exciting sector right now, to be honest.
Certainly in terms of dynamism, there's just so many people doing it. It'll be interesting to see whether there's room for them all, who comes out on top, who doesn't make it. But it's an exciting time. There's a lot going on. There's sports cruisers, there's adventure boats, there's long-range cruisers, there's high-performance stuff.
All sorts of materials too.
Yeah,
it is an exciting place. So we've reached a stage where you and I sort of aim to disagree with one another.
So, I don't think we need to aim to, do we?
Well, it usually happens quite naturally, doesn't it? So, yes or no to a Powercat for
I would, at the right size, for the right reasons. If I wanted it as a cruising vessel, I think they make a lot of sense. I've had a couple of really enjoyable weeks cruising on catamarans. Not much in the way of compromise. There's a slightly odd motion you sometimes get, when you get a sort of three-quarter wave, and you sometimes get that slightly strange sort of corkscrewing crabbing motion. But yes, bottom line, at the right size, and ideally by that, I'd really like something about 60 foot. I mean, we're playing fancy world here, aren't we?
Fair dues.
But yes, bottom line, I would. Big or small, definitely would.
Yeah, well,
and
in terms of the compromises you're making, I mean, you are doing away with the volume on the lower deck, aren't you, for the most part, in relation to a monohull? Yeah,
you trade volume for privacy.
Yeah, and you're paying some money for it too.
That is a proper disadvantage. The mere fact that you can't mould it all in one hull mould, you have to have two hull moulds, it gets expensive.
It does get expensive, and you and I will look at a 60-foot monohull and we'll look at a 60-foot cat and say that is 60% more than a monohull. That's an extraordinary amount of extra premium. And the cat builder will say, wait there, we're not talking about lengths here, we're talking about volume and usability. And this cat has the volume and usability of an 80-footer, not a 60-footer. In fact, we see that very thing, don't we, from Prestige with their M48, which is now the M6, the M7, the M8. That's a 48-footer with the volume they tell us of a 60-footer, 55-footer with that of a 70-footer, and a 65-footer with the volume of an 80-footer. So they're trying to just change that game, change that comparison a little bit to favour them in the real-world market and say, look, it's not like for like. So look, I mean, I've talked myself around in circles and I'm getting caught up in my own skirts here a little bit. So what I'm going to say is it's a surprising yes from me to Powercats. Yeah, I know. No, they just offer so much. There's so much variety.
This is a first, isn't it? We don't normally agree on something.
I know. No, I'm sorry about that. I didn't intend to, but there we are. They just do so much. And even I know we talked a lot about the big ones. That I just remember that little Powercat, that 6.5 metre thing that I enjoyed thoroughly.
Yeah.
And my missus at the time, who was not a boater at all, she loved the stability, the space, the fact it was so easy for her to have a go at. It's all positive, and I'm excited to see what the sector comes up with next.
Well, we'll find out at Cannes.
Exactly, coming up soon. In the meantime, we're going to have to cut that short. That's the end of this particular podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave a like. And also, please do leave your comments, because your comments help us to devise the subject matter for future podcasts. But please do join us again next week for podcast number
7.
See you soon.